All right, welcome to week 9. Here is my reading analysis from the vocabulary playbook modules 4 to 6. I really picked up on the collaboration piece. We really have students collaborate a lot together in class. The only time I ever saw really a problem with any kind of collaboration is when we ask students to do a peer edit. They seem to struggle with that activity and spend an awful lot of time not giving each other constructive feedback because they want to keep their friends. How to promote independence and word consciousness among students. We had a daily activity for the middle school culturally and linguistically diverse kids. They had to bring in words from outside the classroom that they encountered. They would snap a pic with their cell phones, bring in a page from a newspaper or parent's grocery list, for example, or write down a word they heard in class. Sometimes it was a phrase or a bit of slang they heard a classmate use. Instead of providing direct instruction, we had these students work with each other to find meaning. We also made sure to have plenty of books in the classroom that featured their native language and books in English. The books in English were of an easier nature, but not so low that they would be too easy or considered childish. We had reading books on topics kids their age would find interesting. I had one student from France whose love of all things sports kept him constantly scanning the shelves for those types of books. We built independent reading into the day. Unfortunately, I found out that at the high school, many parents complained about ELA teachers spending too much time on independent reading, that the teachers had to stop requiring it once a week. It's hard to get the students interested in words if we have to limit how much reading they do. One of the things I always tried to cover was idioms and figures of speech. Wordplay and word searches was always a good way to get students interested. Visual and word puns are always fun too. I have never tried to get students interested in comedy, but I would like to. Using words to be funny is something they know a lot about, but never seem to capitalize on it. Make sure they know assessing word knowledge. I am much more supportive of an informal, formative approach to assessment. I would support having the teacher facilitate in class discussions which focus on summarizing a passage or passages, asking questions of a text, engaging in conversation with other group members for views and clarifying information, and then making predictions about future events, or in the case of informative texts, something like a call to action the author provides, given the information students have read up to that point. Can the students explain and describe words? Can they use them in their writing? Testing assessing needs to move away from the process of isolation. We can check for understanding and use fix-up strategies to help when there's an issue, but so often teachers simply assess and move on. In recognizing the difference between a mistake and an error, it's easier to provide feedback that will help a student grow in their writing. I want to take this mindset into a classroom if I ever get one. I'm all for fun and games and assessing too. We have used quizzes and vocabulary bingo with students. The teacher shouts out the definition and the students find the word on their bingo card. In reading number 2, the 2021 Zucker Going Nuts for Words Recommendations for Teaching Young Students Academic Vocabulary. The strategies in this reading would work for high schools as well, just on a higher level. We engage high schoolers all the time with shared book reading, multiple turn conversations, and content area instruction through classroom activities almost daily. Students will have to discuss a reading in a group or answer questions about a text. Performing projects such as creating posters or creating a text conversation 2 characters from a novel would have are great ways to help them with vocabulary. They need to know the words in order to write about them. I don't know of any ELA teachers who don't cover vocabulary when reading a novel or other text in class. Sometimes the instruction is targeted and direct, and sometimes it's just covering it. In a social studies class I was in, the teacher had the students repeat a word out loud in unison, and then they had a quick discussion about what the word meant, and he showed examples on the overhead. I don't notice many students asking an adult for what a word means. Usually they struggle with pronunciation. Using the internet is such a quick and easy way to look up a word that they don't ask as much anymore. One approach to word consciousness came in an activity a professor had us do in class, 2 of them actually. First, he had us write a found poem where he took words from a text and formed them into a poem of meaning. We had to understand the relationship between words in order to make it coherent. The second activity was to create a playlist of songs to illustrate something. In our case, it was to describe who we are as people. That was a fun exercise, and it showcased how the words we see every day carry different meanings and can be applied in multiple situations. Domain general and domain specific are word categories that we covered with our CLD students, but not really with regular high school students. I can see where it would be a beneficial approach for young kids. I thought the activity of dissecting all of the words in the Three Little Pigs to be so extra. I would never do that with a high school reading unless we were talking about Shakespeare or poetry. But even then, I still don't think I'd dive that far in depth into a piece. We simply don't have enough time for that. Also, diving that deeply into every word in a poem, for example, would ruin the poem for students. It would be a better approach in that instance to discuss images they found inspiring or interesting and why. With the VOC PowerPoint and video, this entire video was review for me, especially. I, in doing the research for the spelling unit within our group, I have read the Words Their Way chapters, and everything that's covered in this video is basically covered in the book. Also, a lot of this was review from the teacher prep classes I've been in and in my TESOL masters. So I don't really have anything more to kind of add to it. I will just kind of echo that repeated exposure is something that we learned to do. I also wrote in my piece for our group that the dictionary is a great resource and we should teach it. Even though I've never seen a teacher use a dictionary in class, I think it's still worthwhile if you're going to be teaching vocabulary regularly. Usually teachers have the student define a word, use it in a sentence, and draw a picture. I've always heard English teachers complain that students never seem to use the word in a sentence properly. But in the piece I wrote for our group about the syllables and affixes stage, we are using the dictionary to understand words that are related to the word we are looking for. We basically understanding words, that kind of root word situation. We pick words from a piece that helps students to understand the text. We always plan for tiers 1, 2, and 3 words that students need to know. We always have to write lesson plans where we detail how we're going to teach these words. When planning, we pick out the words that are most relevant, but if we want to challenge students, we will assign more words to those advanced students than we would to most other students. It seems we don't really talk often in this class about how to work with students who are gifted and talented or who need a challenge. And so this is one of those ways that we could do that, which is adding to the list of words that these students are working with, especially if we're reading like a novel, we can take more words that we normally wouldn't give to an entire class. So if we were working also with our CLD students, we will cover easier words. And we usually understand which words we need to cover with CLD students because we understand their level and what they do and do not know. And that makes it easier for the text to understand for them. Those words are things like however and because, and more than just those, because those are the ones they will see often but not necessarily understand. These are different than the function words mentioned in the video because we would have to spend significantly more time scaffolding those types of words for CLD students. A, the, is, and are also words that we would cover with CLD students in particular. But that's generally due to things like those words not being covered in like a specific language. There are languages where you miss out on those object words like the car or the dog. The might not just, it might be something and it might not be something in specific languages. We wouldn't need to cover those function words or the tier ones with high school students unless we're really super covering something advanced. I think in particular about an activity that I just did in one of my other classes where we had a writing assignment where we were eliminating passive voice and reducing the use of to be verbs by substituting action verbs. But that's something from a more advanced class. I wouldn't, heap that on to younger kids. I would definitely make that for like 10th, 11th, 12th grade. Finally, the morphemic awareness activities are a good way to get kids independently learning words without getting stuck. I've often seen students simply sitting there waiting for the teacher to help them instead of helping themselves and moving on. It's such a waste of time. Thanks for listening.